Welcome to CBSE English Tutorial, a visual guide.
Have you ever wondered what childhood really means? Is it about playing, dreaming, and going to school? Or is it about survival? Welcome to the world of Lost Spring by Anees Jung, a powerful story that uncovers the hidden struggles of children who are forced to grow up too soon. Let's begin with two places that shaped her vision. Rourkela, an industrial city in Odisha, is known for its massive steel plant and hard-working laborers. Here, life revolves around survival, struggle, and constant effort. On the other hand, we have Hyderabad, a city where history meets modern life. It shows a sharp contrast between wealth and poverty, luxury and hardship. Growing up between these two worlds, Anees Jung developed a deep understanding of inequality. And this is exactly what we see in Lost Spring. The chapter brings us face to face with a harsh truth. There are children who don't go to school, who don't play, who don't dream, because they are busy working to survive. The story is divided into two powerful parts. First, we meet Saheb-e-Alam, a young rag picker living in Simapuri. Every morning, he searches through garbage heaps, not for fun, but for survival. To him, garbage is not waste. It is gold. He dreams of going to school, but poverty doesn't allow him that choice. Even when he finally gets a job at a tea stall, he loses something even more precious: his freedom. Then comes Mukesh from Firozabad, a town famous for its bangle-making industry. Here, children work in dangerous conditions, surrounded by heat, glass, and toxic fumes. It is a cycle of poverty passed from one generation to another. But Mukesh is different. He dares to dream. He wants to become a motor mechanic, a symbol of hope, courage, and change. So what is the central idea of Lost Spring? It shows us how poverty, lack of education, and social injustice steal away the most beautiful phase of life, childhood. It creates a lost spring, where there should have been joy, growth, and dreams.
Saheb's home is a distant memory of the green fields and rivers of Dhaka. He only knows the place through his mother's stories of the storms that eventually swept their entire world away. He left those fields to look for gold in the city. Now his mornings are spent scrounging through the massive garbage dumps of the neighborhood, searching for anything of value. When the author asks why he doesn't go to school, Saheb explains there isn't one nearby. She responds with a glib, half-joking promise to build one herself. A few days later, the boy runs up to her, breathless, asking if his new school is finally ready. She is forced to admit it takes longer to build a school, embarrassed by a promise she never intended to keep. It's a small daily betrayal that reflects the casual privilege of the upper class when interacting with the poor. After months of these encounters, she finally asks for his name. He announces it with pride: Saheb-e-Alam. Saheb has no idea that his name translates to Lord of the Universe. The irony is sharp. The boy who bears this title owns nothing and survives on what others throw away. He roams the streets with an army of barefoot boys. They appear with the morning birds and disappear by noon, living entirely outside the formal structures of the city. When asked about their lack of shoes, The common explanation is that staying barefoot is a tradition. It's a convenient narrative that frames their condition as a cultural choice. This tradition argument acts as a societal denial mechanism. It allows the world to ignore a state of perpetual poverty by rebranding it as a lifestyle, making the suffering of children easier to overlook. Simapuri is a sprawling wilderness on the edge of Delhi. 10,000 ragpickers live here in structures of mud and bamboo, shielded by roofs of tin and tarpaulin, completely isolated from sewage, drainage, or running water. Most residents are squatters who fled Bangladesh in 1971. They have lived in this camp for over 30 years without a legal identity or any official permits to remain on the land. Their only connection to the state is a ration card, allowing them to buy grain. But these cards serve a dual purpose, ensuring residents appear on voter lists, turning their hunger into political capital. For the people of Simapuri, a legal identity is a luxury they cannot afford. Surviving the day and going to bed without an aching stomach is the only metric of success that matters. Human beings are reduced to mere votes in this system. They trade their fundamental identity for the bare minimum calories required to endure another night in the wilderness. Survival in this environment is synonymous with ragpicking. For the adults, the garbage is a means of survival, their daily bread and the very roof over their heads, even if it leaks. For the children, however, the trash is wrapped in wonder. It is a landscape where they might unexpectedly find a rupee note or a silver coin, fueling a constant sense of hope. One winter morning, Saheb stands by the fence of a neighborhood club. He watches young men dressed in pristine white playing tennis, captivated by a game he can only observe from the outside. He wears a pair of discarded tennis shoes, gifted to him because they had a hole in the toe. For a boy who has walked barefoot his entire life, these broken cast-outs are a prize he accepts without question. He has the shoes, and he even uses the club swing when the gatekeeper allows it, but the game itself remains out of reach. The physical fence of the club represents a permanent barrier to the world of the wealthy. Time passes, and the author sees Saheb again. The carefree look that defined his morning bird days has completely vanished from his face. He now works at a tea stall down the road. He earns 800 rupees a month and receives all his meals, pointing toward the stall with a sense of resignation. On the surface, this looks like a step toward stability. He is no longer scrounging in the dirt for coins. He has a job and a guaranteed source of food. This shift is understood through the objects he carries. The lightweight plastic bag once slung over his shoulder is gone, replaced by a heavy steel canister. The plastic bag, despite being filled with trash, belonged to him. The steel canister belongs to the shop owner. Saheb has achieved economic survival, but he has lost his personal autonomy. He is no longer his own master. This loss is the essence of the lost spring. The season of spring represents the joy, potential, and freedom that should define a childhood. Saheb's ultimate tragedy is a systematic theft. The world forced him to auction his freedom to avoid an aching stomach, stripping away his potential before he ever had the chance to realize it. Look at this generated video of a dusty Indian street. A single car goes speeding past, kicking up dirt. In the town of Firozabad, a young boy named Mukesh carefully watches cars like this and announces a simple goal. He wants to be a motor mechanic. In almost any other place, a kid liking cars is entirely ordinary. But here, his declaration defies generations of strict tradition. This photograph shows the sprawling floor of a bangle factory in Firozabad, the center of India's glass-blowing industry. Families here spend their lives working around open furnaces, welding glass to produce colorful bangles for women across the country. To create those brightly colored ornaments, workers rely on furnaces exactly like the one seen here. It is illegal for children to work in these high-temperature, poorly lit rooms. Yet an estimated 20,000 children currently slog through their daylight hours in these conditions, slowly losing the brightness of their eyes. When Mukesh walks home, he navigates stinking lanes choked with garbage. He passes crumbling walls, wobbly, broken wooden doors, and homes with no windows. Families of humans and animals crowd into half-built shacks, coexisting in a state of extreme, primeval poverty. If the work destroys their eyesight and the living conditions remain this bleak, a question arises. Why don't these workers simply pack up, walk out of Firozabad, and find different jobs? The answer reveals that Mukesh wanting to fix cars is a rare attempt to escape, a cycle of labor and tradition that has defined his family for generations. This diagram illustrates the structural forces at play in Firozabad. The town's population is paralyzed by two distinct overlapping systems working in tandem: an internal web of culture and an external circle of economics. Let's zoom in to the internal web. Mukesh's grandmother watches her own husband go blind from glass dust, yet she attributes it to Karam, their destiny. Because they are born into this specific caste of bangle makers, they believe this labor is a divine lineage that cannot be broken. It is a deeply internalized psychological trap. Look at the children in this photograph, sitting on the dark floor surrounded by bangle parts. A young girl named Savita sits in similar darkness, mechanically soldering pieces of glass. She is building objects that symbolize suhag, auspiciousness and joy in an Indian woman's marriage. Yet the very act of creating these symbols is slowly destroying her own eyesight. The older generation has lived this cycle. You will find elderly women wearing bangles on their wrists with no light left in their eyes, confessing they haven't enjoyed a single full meal in their entire lifetime. They accept starvation as the standard cost of their birthright. When parents and grandparents accept suffering as divine will, rebellion is neutralized before a child can even formulate the idea. This internalized feudalism makes any attempt at progress feel futile, as the victims themselves end up enforcing their own misery. If the cultural web breaks their spirit, what happens to the young men who manage to see past it? The obvious solution is to organize. By forming a cooperative, the workers could pool their resources and demand better conditions. This flowchart maps out the second system, the external circle. Money flows from workers to sahukars, protected by police, bureaucrats, and politicians. If young men try to organize, this system weaponizes the law. They get hauled up and dragged to jail under false charges. The physical beatings are effective, but the psychological toll is worse. The young men watch their fathers grow exhausted and broken. Eventually, they fall into an endless conversational spiral, moving from poverty to apathy to greed and finally to injustice. It kills their initiative. The internal culture tells them they deserve their lot in life, while the external political machine punishes those who try to change it. Together, they create a reinforcing cycle of debt and desperation. This animation shows how the internal web and external circle lock together. These forces are a heavy baggage imposed on a child, creating a cage around them. In Firozabad, surviving the furnaces is the expectation. Daring is systematically discouraged by their upbringing. This brings us back to Mukesh. The local garage is a long way from his home, but he firmly insists, "I will walk." That quiet stubbornness is a direct rejection of his caste's fatalism and a refusal to be intimidated by the political machine. When asked if he also dreams of flying a plane, Mukesh falls silent. He stares at the ground, offering a small murmur of embarrassment, but there is no regret in his voice. He simply says no. Very few airplanes fly over Firozabad, so he doesn't dream of them. His ambition is strictly limited to the cars he actually sees hurtling down the dusty streets of his hometown. This restraint makes his goal tangible and grounded, rather than pure fantasy. Mukesh lives in a town defined by mind-numbing toil and the loss of childhood. Yet his stubborn choice to walk to a garage suggests that the instinct to choose one's own path can still survive, even when buried under generations of dust.
What makes Lost Spring so powerful? It's not just the story. It's the way Anees Jung tells it. Through simple yet striking literary devices, she exposes the harsh reality of poverty and the painful truth of a stolen childhood. Let's explore these powerful techniques. Irony creates a sharp contrast between expectation and reality. Take Saheb-e-Alam. His name means Lord of the Universe. But in reality, he is a poor rag picker, searching through garbage just to survive. And then there's Savita. She makes bangles, symbols of happiness and marriage. Yet there is no light in her eyes. Her work creates beauty for others, but destroys her own life. Metaphors make abstract struggles feel real. The title Lost Spring itself is a metaphor. Spring represents youth, hope, and new beginnings. But for these children, that spring is lost forever. Garbage is gold. For us, it's waste. For them, it's survival. And the web of poverty. Once trapped, escape becomes almost impossible. Hyperbole is used to highlight harsh realities. Rag picking is described as a fine art, not because it is beautiful, but because survival has forced children to master it. Calling garbage gold shows how valuable even the smallest thing becomes when you have nothing. Simile creates vivid and relatable images. The rag pickers are described like morning birds, appearing early, disappearing by noon. Savita's hands move like the tongs of a machine, not human, not free, just mechanical. Antithesis and paradox as literary devices highlight deep contradictions. Simapuri is described as on the periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it, physically close, but socially distant. And then comes a powerful paradox. Sahib's steel canister from his new job feels heavier than his old plastic bag. Why? Because he has gained work, but lost his freedom. Finally, imagery brings everything to life. We see narrow lanes, heaps of garbage, crumbling huts. We don't just read the story, we feel it. Conclusion. Through these literary devices, Anees Jung does more than tell a story. She makes us see, feel, and question. A world where childhood is not lived, but lost.
Thank you for watching. See you again in a bit.